the WNBA just got hit with its biggest scandal yet. An insider just dropped some serious tea about corrupt officiating targeting Caitlinclark. And honey, it's worse than anyone thought.
That Caitlinclark had with the referee, whose name I've learned, or at least reportedly, is Michael Price. Michael Price. And I don't know all that was said, but if he said something highly inappropriate, which it appears he did, Michael Price needs to pay a price for his actions.
We're talking about referee Michael Price and what he really said during that heated exchange that had Clark ready to call the league office. This mess runs deeper than you think. But before we get into all the juicy details, let me ask you this. Have you noticed how differently refs treat Caitlinclark compared to other players? Drop your thoughts in the comments below to so. Here's the thing about the WNBA. They've been pretending everything's fine while their house burns down around them. The league's been dealing with officiating problems for years, but now we got concrete evidence that something seriously messed up is happening behind the scenes. Let's talk about what went down during that Fever versus Sun game. Caitlinclark was having a normal conversation with referee Michael Price. She looked calm, collected, just talking like any professional athlete would. Then something happened that changed everything in a split second. You could literally see the moment when Clark's whole demeanor shifted. 1 second she's casual. The next
about calling the league. At least that's what she reportedly was saying. And I'm all for it because something was said that took Caitlin to another level. She was already upset, but you could see the moment when she went to another level.
She was already upset, but you could see the moment when she went to another level. Here's where it gets interesting. Clark didn't get a technical foul. Now, we all know how quick refs are to slap technicals on players, especially Clark. She gets called for the smallest things. Bounce the ball too hard? Technical. Show any emotion? Technical. But here, after she clearly lost her cool and had to be held back by coaches, nothing happened. That tells us everything we need to know. Price knew he crossed a line. He knew whatever he said was so inappropriate that giving her a technical would only make things worse for him. Because if this situation got reviewed, they'd have to explain why she reacted that way. The body language says it all. Clark went from respectful conversation to complete outrage faster than you can blink. She pointed at him, made the phone gesture, indicating she was going to call the league, and told him to grow up, saying what he said was just rude. But here's what really gets me. Price's reaction when she confronted him, he shrugged his shoulders like he didn't care. That's not the behavior of someone who accidentally said something wrong.
If he had not gone over the line with something, there's no way he would not have teed her up. Everybody wants to tee up Caitlinclark. We know other people get away with stuff. If Caitlinclark so much as bounces the ball too hard or bounces it off the stanchion, all of a sudden she's disrespecting the game, or she hits the stanchion and she's disrespecting the game. But so they're definitely not trying to avoid giving her a technical. But interestingly, with her reaction, which was quite animated, no technical foul, which tells me, dude done said something he ain't got no business saying. Excuse the ebon.
Now, let's talk about who Michael Price actually is, because this guy's history is something else. He's been officiating in the WNBA for over a decade. And guess what? He's got a reputation. Mercury fans have been complaining about him for years, saying he had it out for Diana Taurasi. Sound familiar? This isn't some new ref who doesn't know better. This is a veteran official who's been around long enough to know exactly what he's doing. And apparently, what he's been doing is...
We know about the ref Caitlinclark argued with. So, this says he's known by Mercury fans. At first I thought, that might explain it with the Mercury, trying to troll the Fever concerning DeWanna Bonner, but it doesn't sound like that from this. He's not known favorably, according to this. Price has been a ref in the league for several years, and there are plenty of fan conversations on old WNBA-related forums in which Mercury supporters insist he has a grudge against the team, and especially against Diana Taurasi, who retired ahead of the beginning of this season. He's been officiating in the WNBA for several years. It's not immediately clear how long Price has been reffing in the league, but Swish appeal referenced Price back in 2013. And funnily enough, it was in connection with the technical foul levied against Taurasi.
The 2012 WNBA Finals incident really shows his pattern. He gave technical fouls to both Lindsay Whalen and Coach Cheryl Reeve during Game 2. That's not normal officiating. That's someone on a power trip who enjoys controlling the game through intimidation. What's really messed up is how the league handles these situations. Kathy Engelbert, the commissioner, acts like there's no officiating problem. She's sitting there pretending everything's fine, while fans and players are screaming about biased calls and inappropriate behavior from refs. The accountability in this league is basically non-existent. Players get fined for criticizing officials, but officials can apparently say whatever they want to players. Without consequences, that's not how professional sports should work. That Clark's reaction tells us this wasn't just about basketball. When she made that phone gesture and said she was calling the league, that was someone who heard something personal, something that crossed professional boundaries. You don't react that way to a standard disagreement about a call. The timing of when this happened is important, too. Connecticut wanted to review something after Indiana had already inbound the ball. That's against the rules. You can't challenge after the play has moved on. It's like trying to challenge a word in Scrabble after someone else has already played their turn. S.O. Clark was probably explaining the rules of Price, having a normal conversation about why the review couldn't happen. Then he said something that took it to a completely different level, something that made her realize this wasn't about basketball anymore. The fact that Price approached her when she called him over shows he knew he was in the wrong, that if he'd been professional and appropriate, he would have maintained his distance and handled it through proper channels. Instead, he came over to continue the confrontation. His shoulders shrugged when she told him she was calling the league. That's the behavior of someone who thinks he's untouchable, someone who believes he can say whatever he wants without facing consequences. Unfortunately, based on how the WNBA operates, he's probably right. This whole situation highlights the bigger problem with women's sports officiating. Female athletes already face enough challenges without having to deal with refs who think they can say inappropriate things. These women are professionals who deserve the same level of respect as any male athlete. The double standard is obvious when you look at how Clark gets treated versus other players. She gets called for things that other players do all the time without consequences. She gets technical fouls for showing emotion, while other players can argue and complain without any punishment. But when she finally reacts to something genuinely inappropriate, suddenly she's a problem. Suddenly, she's the one who needs to control herself better. That's not how this should work. The Mercury fan complaints about Price targeting Taurasi make perfect sense. Now, this guy apparently has a history of going after star players, particularly those who don't back down from him. He seems to take it personally when players challenge his authority. What's scary is how many other refs might be operating the same way. If Price feels comfortable enough to say something so inappropriate that it triggers that kind of reaction, what's happening in games where cameras aren't catching everything? The league's response to the situation will tell us everything we need to know about their commitment to player safety and professionalism. If they sweep this under the rug like they do with everything else, we'll know where their priorities really lie. Clark's second year in the league should be about her continuing to develop as a player and helping grow the sport. Instead, she's having to deal with refs who apparently think they can treat her however they want. The phone gesture she made wasn't just about that one incident. It was about all the accumulated nonsense she's had to deal with since entering the league. All the bias calls, the different standards, the lack of protection from the league office. That Price's long tenure in the league actually makes this worse, not better. He's had years to learn how to be professional, years to understand appropriate boundaries with players. The fact that he's still behaving this way after all this time shows it's not ignorance, it's intentional. The shrug he gave Clark when she confronted him shows everything you need to know about his character. That's not someone who made a mistake and feels bad about it. That's someone who thinks he's above accountability. This incident proves what many people have been saying for years. There's a serious culture problem in WNBA officiating. When refs feel comfortable crossing professional lines with players, that's a systemic issue that requires systemic solutions. The league can't keep pretending these are isolated incidents. When multiple players have issues with the same ref, when fans can predict which officials will make bias calls, when star players are getting targeted for special treatment, that's not coincidence. That's corruption. Clark's reaction was completely justified. She's a professional athlete who deserves to be treated with respect. If a ref crosses that line, she has every right to be angry about it and to report it to the league office. The real question is whether the league will actually do anything about it. Based on their track record, they'll probably issue some generic statement about maintaining professionalism and then let Price keep working games like nothing happened. That's exactly the kind of response that allows this behavior to continue. When there are no real consequences for inappropriate conduct, officials learn they can get away with anything. The fans deserve better than this. The players deserve better than this. The sport deserves better than this. But until the league starts taking these issues seriously and holding officials accountable, nothing's going to change. What makes this even more frustrating is that we're talking about a league that's supposed to be empowering women. How can you claim to support female athletes when you allow officials to disrespect them without consequences? The hypocrisy is incredible. Clark has brought more attention to the WNBA than it's had in years. She's filling arenas, breaking viewership records, and getting people who never cared about women's basketball to tune in. And this is how the league treats her? The irony is that Price's behavior is probably going to backfire on him. Clark has a massive fan base now, and they're not going to let this go quietly. Social media is already buzzing with people demanding answers about what he said. But here's what really bothers me about this whole situation. It's not just about Clark. If Price is willing to say something inappropriate to the league's biggest star, what's he saying to players who don't have that platform? What's he saying to rookies who are afraid to speak up? The power dynamic between officials and players is already unbalanced. Refs can eject players, call technical fouls, and essentially control someone's ability to do their job. When you add inappropriate personal comments to that mix, it becomes a form of harassment. And let's be real about something else. Clark is tough. She's been dealing with pressure and criticism her whole career. For her to react that strongly, whatever Price said must have been really out of line. This isn't someone who gets rattled easily. That Clark's reaction shows she's not going to tolerate that kind of treatment. Good for her. Someone needs to stand up to these officials who think they can cross professional boundaries without consequences. The league's silence about this incident is deafening. They're quick to fine players for criticizing officials, but when an official crosses a line, suddenly they don't have anything to say. That double standard is exactly what's wrong with the WNBA. If the league wants to be taken seriously as a professional organization, they need to hold their officials to the same standards they hold their players. You can't have one set of rules for players and another for refs. Clark's willingness to confront him publicly and threaten to call the league office shows she's not going to be intimidated. That's exactly the kind of leadership the league needs from its star players. This situation is bigger than just one ref and one player. It's about the culture of the WNBA and whether they're truly committed to treating their athletes with respect. The league's response will tell us everything we need to know. This corruption runs deeper than anyone wants to admit, and Caitlin Clark is just the tip of the iceberg. The WNBA needs to clean house before this gets even worse. What do you think should happen to Michael Price? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.